for Transport and Infrastructure Engineer Michael Kamau. More than 30 years in the civil service, and we'll be talking about that a little bit later. But let's start with the significant projects that are ongoing now in terms of transformation of our infrastructure. And we'll start with railways.
Yes.
Our railway line, I think 1895
yes.
is when it started being built by the colonial administration. Took it about 5-6 years to complete. We've been using this line for the past 110 or so years. It really is a shame that we've stayed with it that long, but now we're seeing this tripartite agreement, Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, coming together and saying we're going to invest in this. Tell us a little bit more about this and what kind of timelines are we looking at?
It's very exciting these times are very exciting that we are prepared to build the railway. The government showed its commitment by putting in 25 billion in this year's budget and introduced the 1.5% levy on all imported goods so that we can build up on those funds. We are very seriously looking for funding from friendly countries, and we are working with Uganda and Rwanda after the tripartite heads of state meeting in Entebbe last month. It's exciting because if you look at it, the tracks now between Nairobi and Mombasa on a single day, on average, 2,000 trucks. Those are the ones that pass through our bridge at Mariakani, 2,200. If those are going to Mombasa, then there are 2,200 trucks going to maintain equilibrium. So we are dealing with something like 4,800. If you divide that section of Mombasa Road, then it means that you have about 100 trucks for every kilometer. That's a huge number. At 10 trucks for every kilometer.
Incredibly high. We're now developing this new standard gauge railway. Kenya's contribution to this, just under half, is it a trillion?
It's a trillion.
It's about a trillion,
it's a
1.2.
1.2.
Yes.
The biggest section, 1,000 kilometers, is in Kenya.
Yes.
1,000 from Nairobi to Maraba, across to Uganda, and then to Rwanda. So about half of the contribution is in Kenya.
Is in Kenya. Now, you've mentioned the 1.5 levy, 25 billion set aside. We've got an awful lot of money to make up. And looking at donors for this might be a little bit too ambitious.
Here we don't need donors. We don't need donors. We need bank financing.
Okay.
Because this is a project that is going to earn money. The railway will be carrying goods and people will pay for it. In fact, if we were to wait, we would have concessioned. But the railway is not something that you really concession. The government has to put investment in infrastructure, build the track and the stations and the handling capacity, and then lease the line to people, the same way we do with the airport. We build the airport facilities, we build the runway, and then you have British Airways, Kenya Airways, everybody uses it.
Speaking of which, let's move on and look at the issue of concessioning. And right now, Rift Valley Railways, of course, operating services on our lines in Kenya and in Uganda as well. Concerns with the performance of Rift Valley Railways. I have two questions for you. Number one, what is going to be done to ensure that Rift Valley Railways does meet the standards of performance set by our governments? But number two, what do you plan on doing? How are you going to select the companies when it comes to the new standard gauge railway? Okay,
number one, Rift Valley Railways. The only way to measure their performance is how much are they carrying. Now, when they started, they were carrying, Kenya Railways was carrying 1.5 million tons. They are carrying 900,000 tons, 0.9 of a million. So that is a drop. So poor performance. But they've started their investment after the restructuring. But what is important is even if they operated at full capacity, they would be operating at 5 million tons per annum. The cargo at the port of Mombasa is growing at a rate of 10%. Mombasa is already doing 22 million tons and growing. So we need another 4 lines if they were to perform like RVL. And that is why we are building the standard gauge railway.
In any case, what do you do with somebody who has won the bid, but you are not satisfied with their performance? At what point do you say enough is enough?
We have a bilateral agreement with Uganda And indeed, on Wednesday, I chaired the Ugandan minister, John Byabagamba, chaired the bilateral meeting, the Joint Railway Commission. We reviewed the performance. We are not happy. We are urging them to pull up their socks. We are meeting next month, and the monitoring, which has been a bit not very good, we want to enhance the monitoring and facilitate anything that the government is supposed to do towards contributing to their performance.
Okay, we'll be keeping an eye on that. Moving now to our roads.
Yes.
And right now, a little bit of a storm brewing with respect to the roads funds allocated to counties, because the Treasury has recalled those funds. The concern has been that the county governments don't have the capacity to deal with these funds, and in particular, we're talking about funds allocated to Kenya Urban Roads Authority, the Kenya Rural Roads Authority, and the Rural Electrification Authority also has been affected.
Yes.
What's your comment? County governors say you are simply undermining them. What's your response?
I don't have capacity to undermine the county governments and devolution, because the Constitution clearly states that it is the transition authority which is to determine which functions are going to be transferred and when. So that is number one. The county, the transition authority has to determine. I know that they put an advert in the papers for the county governments to apply for the functions that are going to be transferred. The fact of the matter is the roads, the Kenya Road Maintenance Levy Fund is one of the funds that is ring-fenced within government, within the Constitution. It is a ring-fenced fund. It cannot be used for any other function other than road maintenance. It cannot be used, for example, to pay staff. So even if it was to go to the county government, it must be a conditional grant, which has to be audited and it has to do roads, not for payment. I'm not saying that the governors intend to use it to pay for salaries and so on, but it is ring-fenced. I'm not the one who determines what functions are to be transferred. That is the work of the transition authority. If they have, well and good. We are supporting the county governments. But let me put it on the other side. The funds also for the development budget of the Ministry of Roads were transferred to the counties. The contracts are with Kenya National Highways Authority, KERA, and KURA. Even if the governors got this money, they cannot pay. They cannot pay because they don't have contracts. And
so this is a legal process issue. It's about operations. It is not an attempt to undermine or ensure that the county governments do not handle
in fact,
these
let me
funds.
tell you, I went through it. When we formed the three authorities, when they were formed, the money had to come through the ministry for about 1.5 years. And then there is something that is called vesting, where I was the accounting officer as the permanent secretary, and I was the employer. And we had to prepare documents to transfer these contracts to the authorities. The contractor signs, and the authorities were to sign, and myself. So there is a process. It's not just a transfer, because the contracts are with KERA.
Right.
So KERA would have to do the vesting. The whole idea is the government services should not stop. So we would want to finish the ongoing contracts. The governors should also now be preparing to start new contracts with the money that they have.
So smooth transition is
smooth
what this is.
transition.
Let's look now at the scope of some of the other projects. We've got LAPSET, which is a hugely significant regional project involving ports, railways, roads, pipelines. Of course, Kenyans can see the transformation around the country. If you can't see the road transformation, please SMS us and we'll tell the ministry where the problems are, because many places, especially in Nairobi City in particular, we are seeing transformation. My question to you is, why did it take so very long? And because you've been in the civil service for more than 30 years, you can tell us, all of a sudden over the past 5 years, incredible transformation. Before that, during, for instance, the Nyayo era, it was crumbling. What has it taken to start to transform?
The 90s, I think, in terms of infrastructure development, were a wasted decade because we didn't have any development partners. Nobody wanted to touch Kenya.
Was it a funding issue, you think?
The funding issue, yeah. The development partners had taken off from Kenya.
Because of corruption, presumably?
Not corruption, but also issues.
Governance.
Also, we had problems with them. They also wanted to decide how government is run. It's a fact. We all know that some representatives of our development partners, you would see them talking politics and actually dictating what was to be done in government. And I think President Moi stood his ground and said this won't happen. And for that reason, some of them withdrew. Then the Kibaki government came in, and things mellowed, and you noticed that the development partners actually kept off politics. You can't see now the country director of the World Bank coming and taking a platform and issuing ultimatums to government.
What created that? How did the government ensure that change happened?
It also came on a platform that they were going to bring change. There were very many review of very many regulations. For example, new laws that enabled new engagement. The economy started growing, and the World Bank country office now is the second largest after the one in Washington. They have the largest office building in the world. The African Development Bank have their regional office in Nairobi. The European Union from Kenya is running some of the operations from Nairobi. So engagement, a bit of understanding, and then allowing them to really come and review the procurement laws, engaging them in terms of in-building governance issues in the infrastructure sector. That has helped.
Let's finally, transformation is happening. How do we ensure that it works in the interests of the Kenyan people? We do see some road safety issues. Yes. How is your ministry, for instance, working with other ministries on training and enforcement of road rules? Also, there's the social realities. In Garissa, just recently, I was there with some elders who said, we're very excited about the road that's coming, but it's bringing businessmen from other communities with it. So there's some very soft, they seem soft issues, but real issues. How do you work with other ministries to ensure that from a holistic perspective, all these things are dealt with?
Number one, I think one of the hallmarks of the Jubilee government is to break down silo mentality, where my ministry, and it's me, and I know. If you ask me about energy, I'll tell you what is happening within energy. And I expect the Minister of Energy can come and tell you what we are doing in roads. So breaking down the silos, where people want to do things on their own. I cannot sit here and blame the police for road carnage, because I'm part and parcel of that system. So the issue now is, if there is something that the police are not doing right, I should go and start working with the police department to improve the safety on our roads. And I'll give you an example. Before the formation of the NTSA, and really it has been formed, but the services have not been transferred, like registration of motor vehicles is still with KRA, but that is not a problem. Even when it comes and it is at one docket, we are going to need the police, KRA to do certain things. It's really supporting one another. Right. We have a serious problem, and that is why I've been a bit slow in talking about the issues of road safety, because it is not just about the speed governors and the number of passengers. It's deeper. How do we do a motor vehicle inspection? How is it being carried out today? How are the driving licenses issued? What is the etiquette on the road, like the road hog that now is?
Exactly.
So the foundation of this is driving licenses. Do we have competent drivers on our roads? We must get competent drivers. Number two, are the vehicles inspected? Are they okay? Then, because if they are inspected, the speed governors will be okay. So it's a multiplicity of things. Right. And it is very important that we work together so that the process that we put is we're going to wind up with a two-pronged question.
Number one, the issue of institutional strength and stability. You've spoken out on this, and I think it connects with the ability of our institutions to work together in the interests of the Kenyan public.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that. And finally, as you close as well, give us some of the projects that you are working on right now that you feel are most exciting for Kenya. We've talked about the railways, we've talked about LAPSET. What else is happening? Those two, please.
Number one, the breaking down of silos. The Port of Mombasa is the best example. The best example. Every department works at the Port of Mombasa: intelligence, police, CAFES, agriculture, health. But everybody was reporting at their own time. You carry out inspection at different times. No central command. So the president directed that everybody who works in the port must report to the MD of Kenya Ports Authority. So you do timetabling together. You decide when the goods are going to be inspected, and I can tell you the verification of goods now happens at 9:30, 12:30, and 2:30. All the officers are there. If you are not there, you must explain to the MD, whether you are from customs or not. Technically, you report to your commissioner of customs, you report to the MD, KEBS, and so on. What has happened? A total transformation at the operations at the Port of Mombasa. They broke the record of the highest number of 20-foot equivalent containers at 1,759 from the average of 1,300. It's like breaking the world record in
systems that work, you're saying, and creating leadership from a central
precisely.
Yes.
Now,
position.
What we are now talking in government is replicating the same experience. What did we do? There is not a single roadblock between Mombasa and Maraba. We have security patrol. That is why you find people with ivories being stopped and all these explosives being caught by police, but not the roadblocks that we used to have. Over 1,000 kilometers. What has happened? The number of cargo, the tonnage leaving the Port of Mombasa is high. The Ugandans have stopped complaining, the Rwandese have stopped complaining, and the people from the DR Congo are very happy. We have done the same at the airport, JKIA.
Right.
50 years of independence. The most drastic step was deciding that the commissioner of customs goes to Mombasa. And she reported in Mombasa last week to work from Mombasa. Because most of the complaints were from the Port of Mombasa, people spent a lot of time shuttling between Nairobi and Mombasa.
It's as simple as streamlining and getting the processes.
No investment,
right.
Not a single coin invested, nothing changed, just systems.
To wind up, finally, just in literally 30 seconds, what are you most excited about with respect to your ministry?
Virtually everything. LAPSET, the railway, and the greenfield terminal at JKIA, the flyover over Uhuru Highway, Dogokudu. Those are the most exciting projects that I'm looking forward to in the next 4 years.
Thank you, Engineer Kamau. And what we're going to do for you and for the ministry, if you have a problem on your roads, if you have ideas for the railways, do send us some SMSs through. The number is 22422, and we'll forward them to your ministry so you can see some of the thoughts of our viewers on infrastructure and transport in Kenya. Asante sana, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.